Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast from The Mind Matters by Laura K. Ellis. I am a multi-certified hypnotherapist, but just as importantly, a highly developed empath, and that has been a driving force to my clients' success. So in this podcast, I want to talk about toxic relationships and toxic people. Over the last 12 years, seeing my clients, although everyone has a different background, it always comes full circle back to the same issue, and that is your self-worth. Granted, some individuals grow up in a healthier environment than others, which is greatly enhancing their lives as they move forward. Having that nurturing background, perhaps one or hopefully both parents saying, you're just awesome, and you've done great, and you can do anything, and you are unstoppable. But sadly, most of us have had parents or primary caretakers that don't know any better, didn't, or even worse, didn't care. So what happens is we have generation upon generation of individuals on this planet that have been programmed, okay? And this can go back 3 to 4 generations. So let me fast forward for a moment and talk about self-esteem, self-worth in relationships. So here's an example. If your primary caretakers, your parents, were arguing, did not seem to get along whatsoever, didn't matter what about, just the fact that it was a repetitive cycle of angst between them, and or it could have been your grandparents, whoever you were exposed to in early childhood, from the 3rd trimester in the womb, believe it or not, until 10 years of age. So your unconscious mind takes in all this information. It doesn't have the critical factor developed at that point in time. So it's basically a sponge taking in water. And these are what we as adults are operating from, unless you get to the root cause, which is in the unconscious mind, the subconscious. We become products of our environment, okay? So back to relationships. So your parents or primary caretakers, adoptive parents, doesn't matter. Whoever was in your environment most often as a youngster, okay? Again, from the 3rd trimester in your mother's womb, even if you were put up for adoption, if she was having a very difficult time, people, ridiculing her, whatever it was, or her, even just her sadness of having to give you up or knowing she had to, all of those things become a part of you, those feelings, okay? So we attract this information, and most oftentimes it is negative. I would say in generations to come, given we're more educated and enlightened on, and are certainly being that now, on what not to do, and to be more aware of the programs that we're running and operating from, the generations to come may not have such a challenging time dealing with all this. But back to relationships. So, for example, you find yourself time and time again attracting individuals, marriages, long-term partners, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, whatever is right for you, not speaking about gender here whatsoever, okay? But you notice that these relationships that you're attracting, emphasis on attracting here, are dysfunctional. And here's one example. I had a client who was not needing to be under my services any longer, who kept attracting 3 times actually men that had cheated on her. And so time and time again she goes through the heartache and the emotional upset of these relationships where she doesn't trust anymore. Okay? Now, what happened there? What happened was, most likely, her parents, mother or father, was unfaithful to each other, or one of them was. Or she was raised by an aunt. The auntie was to her boyfriend or husband. These are programs, these are situations that, again, the unconscious mind picks up and assumes, because it doesn't know the difference. It's your best friend, it's a miracle maker, it's all of that, but it needs direction. So it didn't understand that that was not a good thing. So what happens? This information in your unconscious mind, as now you're an adult and you're unconsciously attracting these cheaters, if you will, by default. Okay? So why are they cheaters? Well, here we go again. They have been programmed as well. Okay? Parents, grandparents, primary caretakers, whoever they were in their early childhood that was dysfunctional, and information that before the age of 10, little people just can't process. They don't have the ability to say yes or no to the information, like, no, that's not a good thing, or no, daddy shouldn't, yell at mommy, or anything anything really, along those lines. So after the age of 10, I'm skipping over for a moment, the critical factor of mind is developed, and it gives individuals the ability to say, wait a minute, daddy shouldn't be doing that to mommy, or mommy shouldn't be doing that to daddy, or auntie or uncle shouldn't be doing that to the person they love, because we come in on this planet from a love standpoint. We come from love. And so, yes, we expect that, we deserve that, we need that, but if not nurtured properly, okay, we become exactly the patterns that our primary caretakers were and or are. And the patterns will continue. Everyone who's listening, they will continue. All the talk therapy in the world is not going to change that. Not to mention it could take decades. What will change it is going back to the source, the root cause, which is the subconscious mind. And to put it simply, reprogramming. Now, I want you to know that those memories, or these memories, whatever the situation is, will always be there. But with hypnotherapy, with an ethical hypnotherapist, and someone who has experience as well is able to diffuse these programs as long as you're open and receptive to the change, or changes. Okay? So what happens then? Well, after a series of sessions, not many, depending on the individual really, how you process the information, okay? The unconscious will not have you attracting these toxic relationships and or toxic individuals. And then we're also going in at that time with hypnotherapy and learning, relearning to love yourself, loving yourself unconditionally. 90% of the people, my clients that come to me, maybe more than that, have self-esteem or self-worth challenges. Again, all stemming back from early childhood, and most always different reasons. What might be traumatic to one person, for example, in childhood, may not have affected the neighbor if the neighbor experienced it the same way. Okay? That's the same thing really if you know anything about it, about post-traumatic stress disorder. What affects one individual in the traumatic event one way may not affect them the next time, or, God forbid, the person standing next to them who experienced the exact same thing. We all have triggers based on past conditioning, and this can go back for lifetimes, really. Okay, but you need to know, beyond the shadow of any doubts, that you're worthy, and that you are an amazing spiritual being, and that nothing, be it personality, predisposition, or predisposition to emotional sensitivity, things that you perceived that were done wrongly, or that you might have done wrongly out of default based on past conditioning, okay? None of these things can hinder your happiness and fulfillment, okay, when addressed properly through the process of hypnotherapy. I want to share something with you as well. Most of you, if you're listening, know anything about the comedy circuit, have heard of Ron White. And he was with the blue-collar comedians very popular back in mid-2000s and so forth. Anyway, Mr. White had a severe alcohol problem. And he doesn't talk about that, but I would venture to say some other addictions as well. But most prominently, the alcohol was destroying his life, really. So he was on a podcast recently that I watched, and I was so grateful that I was led to it. And this was a recent podcast. You can find it here somewhere. If you Google, or rather YouTube, Ron White recently. So a year and a half ago, he pretty much hit rock bottom. Now these are his words in the podcast. Okay, not verbatim, but his words in essence. So he had been through numerous rehab centers. Okay? And you can imagine, celebrity status have the means to put out massive amounts of money for something they think and hope and pray, I'm sure, is going to help them overcome their addiction, whatever it is that they're there for. Well, unfortunately, oftentimes it doesn't work, and they keep coming back and spending thousands and thousands of dollars. In his case, he had spent $30,000 times, I don't know how many, I don't recall, for each stay in these rehab centers. So, moving forward, he still had an alcohol problem. And a friend of his suggested that he go to a hypnotherapist there in California, an eccentric gentleman, from what he said, that was actually, this was a little funny to me, operating out of his garage. So Mr. White stated he was a little apprehensive, but he went because it was a friend of his that recommended this individual. And in 5 sessions, I think he said something about the sessions being $300 a piece. So $1,500 later, he hasn't had a drink now in almost 2 years. Think about that for a minute. $1,500 to most people isn't really a lot of money, considering it's going to change your life for the better. But think about the massive amounts of money that he spent time and time again in these upscale rehab centers that didn't work for him. Now, Mr. White's problem, as everyone else's, and I've dealt with severe alcoholics as well, all stems again, past conditioning. Now, the aspect of addictions, right, can show up in different ways. So, for example, if Mr. White's mother or father didn't have an alcohol problem, they might have had a different addiction. So to the unconscious mind, addiction is addiction, and it works the same way with relationships and toxic individuals. If you had a mother that was extremely negative and was not supportive or nurturing to you, to your siblings that you might have heard or observed, okay, that's detrimental to self-worth and self-esteem as an adult. Those recordings, those tapes, if you think of your unconscious mind like a reel-to-reel tape recorder, just keep playing, excuse me, over and over and over again, which is why no matter what the challenge is that you're trying to overcome, keeps happening unless you address it on the unconscious level. Excuse me again, everyone. It's been a long day. That being said, you hear stories of individuals that, leave with strangers and they become in awful situations, making very bad decisions. All of that, to all of you listening, is also based on past programs, making bad decisions. Okay? So I want you to think about all of this, and I certainly don't want to see anyone become or remain a victim to any adverse circumstance. I've been practicing going over 12 years shortly. And if you want to learn more about my work, I'll leave the link below. But in reference to relationships, primarily, and toxic individuals that keep seemingly ricocheting back into your world, I'm also going to leave a link in the description where you can purchase a 1-hour workshop that I had done several years ago that really puts you in touch with ideas. Let your unconscious mind, your conscious mind come together and understand some things about you that most likely you've never heard before. It's just a 1-hour workshop, but I have gotten such good reviews within the workshop itself, and also the recording on MP3 as well. So I'm going to leave that link below too, and you're welcome to purchase it. It's well within everyone's means for sure, and definitely eye-opening. Okay? So until the next time, thank you for listening. And if you would kindly like and subscribe to this channel, it certainly helps the channel. And I will put out another one just as soon as I'm able. Take care to everyone right now.